Greetings, fellow songwriters and seekers, and welcome to Muse and Measure, where spiritual practice meets songwriting craft. Today's question comes from Port Townsend, Washington, a place dear to my heart. I lived in a dry dock boat out in the woods just down the road from Port Townsend in Chimacum, Washington for a while, and that area is just absolutely beautiful. So Michael from Port Townsend asks, how to finish a song? I'm great at coming up with ideas and parts of song, but apparently it's not rewarding enough for me to finish a song because I basically never do. Yeah, I can definitely relate to this. Through the years, I've started many songs and didn't finish them all. I can say that the biggest game changer for me when it comes to finishing songs is having a daily habit of songwriting, because otherwise you just don't put in the grunt work. It's very entertaining to just play around with coming up with little ideas. It gives you a little dopamine rush. You feel like you did something creative, but then at the end of the day, you don't have a finished song. And we'll get to the reward of that later on. But having a daily practice really enables you to get better at songwriting and then to finish all these song ideas and develop them into something which is even greater than what they started with. And you'll be surprised and delighted at how they go from just this kernel of an idea into something that is really cool. So I did a whole video on atomic habits, but I just briefly want to go over them again. If you want to watch the full video, I'll put that down below in the description. But basically, atomic habits take these big, amorphous, grand ideas that we have about our lives called goals and makes them into actual actionable day-to-day habitual routines that make them actually come true. So it has a few different strategies to do this, but what I've really found useful is the one on habit stacking. So you take something that you already do and add the new habit on top of it. So it just kind of builds on something that is already habitual and makes the other thing much more likely to become a habit because it's stuck onto something that's already a habit. So for example, every morning when I drink a cup of coffee, which I just do and I've done for my whole life, my whole adult life, now I grab my songwriting journal and I just write a few lyrics, whatever comes to my mind. And the morning's kind of a really cool time to write lyrics because you're kind of in that liminal space between dream and waking. And so your imagination is still kind of flowing. You're not yet bogged down with all the kind of BS and all the little minutia that you're gonna have to worry about that day. So it's really kind of cool. You get kind of these dreamlike images that come through in your songwriting. So habit stacking is really useful. The other thing is to set a specific time and location for when you're going to do songwriting. So unless you have, I'm going to do songwriting for 5 minutes at 4 p.m. every day once I get home from work. Unless you have a specific time and a place, you're never going to get these daily things done and they aren't going to become daily habits. So pick a time and a place where you're going to do it, but start very small. So for 1 minute a day, I'm going to do songwriting. And start just by doing the prep work for songwriting. So as a runner, and when I trained for the marathon this year, it was very hard for me to get motivated to want to do that. So I use the atomic habit strategy of just picking like the first little baby steps in that. So one of the things that's recommended to do is like every morning when you get up out of bed, your running shoes are there, you just put on your running shoes. That's it. That's your goal for the day. And then you're going to feel good because you achieved that goal. And then you just build on that, okay? Well then I'm going to put on my running clothes every day and my shoes. That's the next week. And then I'm going to go outside and run around the block once. And then before you know it, all these next steps get much more easier because you've taken it in baby steps. So how would that translate to songwriting? So every day when I'm done checking my bank account, I'm going to open up my DAW and listen to the song that I worked on most recently. Okay? So a DAW, for those of you guys who don't know, is a digital audio workstation. Or if you're a songwriter in the old-fashioned way, you're just going to take out your notebook and just read what you wrote the previous day. And just do that for 1 minute. And then over time you can expand that, but what this does is it plants a seed. So if you look at the song that you've been working at and you review it in your mind, throughout the day, it's going to come back because it's telling your brain this is important. Because our brain every single night is doing pruning. It's getting rid of all the junk that we don't need. And you really have to kind of tell your brain what's important. So doing these tiny little things, even though they seem very insignificant, you're really rewiring your brain to focus on the right thing. So you're telling your brain, this song's important. And then throughout the day, you're going to have these little epiphanies where, oh, I should add that to my song. Or you're going to start hearing little lines that you can add to your song. This happens to me all the time. And it's really one of the great rewards about songwriting is you get these little bursts of joy. And then it kind of refocuses your whole life. So the drudgery of the normal life, of your commute, or whatever you have to do throughout the day, all of a sudden is enlivened with these bursts of inspiration. And so it's a really powerful practice. So use the atomic habits in that way. Just start really, really small, set a specific time and a place where you're going to do your songwriting, and then do habit stacking. So while I'm drinking a cup of tea at night, I'm going to look at my songwriting journal. Okay? When I take off my shoes on the couch, when I get home from work, or after the evening walk, I'm going to pick up my ukulele or guitar right there, and I'm going to play through the guitar chords for the song once. Something as simple like that is going to make it so finishing the songs is much easier. And then for the second point that you brought up in your question about like motivation and it being rewarding, well, it's very, very entertaining to get little bursts of dopamine by doing little bits of entertainment, little activities like coming up with little song ideas. It's a lot like scrolling on your phone. You get a little bit of excitement, you feel like you're doing something, and then once you get bored, you just move on. Okay? So that gives you some very short-term joy, but the problem is it's not really lasting and not fulfilling. And so finishing a song is actually 1,000 times more rewarding because you really feel like you did something. And I can tell you that listening back to the demos of songs that I've completed is one of the great joys of my life, because you really feel like you did something. And it's you took something that was just a kernel of an idea and you made it into something that's a full-fledged song. And that feels really, really good, especially if it's a song you like. Now, if it's a song you end up not liking, well, you can just chalk that up. Well, I've got, just like Gershwin said, all of us have a certain amount of bad songs in us. So I got rid of one. I burnt off that bad karma. So that one's out. Okay? You can keep a little bank of bad songs that you can laugh at later and go, oh, wow, listen to all these terrible songs. Look how far I've come. So you get a sense of satisfaction with that too, looking at your trajectory as a songwriter. And then the other thing is something that actually goes all the way back to Socrates, which is just about the long-term good versus the short-term good. And he basically in this dialogue called, what was it called? Let me look at my notes here. The Protagoras. He called it a kind of a hedonistic calculation, where something that we all want the good for our lives. And so we measure the good by, how big it seems, like how much of a good is it, okay? And he gave this kind of metaphor of these balls or like orbs, like off in the distance, something maybe giant, like think about Jupiter, right? Way off in the distance, but Jupiter looks so small, and our moon looks so large because of proximity. So what we can take from this is that the short-term pleasures seem so much bigger because they are right in front of us. They are immediate gratification. Even though in the long term they are much, much, much smaller than that far-off goal, the good life. Okay? And that's why it's so much easier to be tempted by the short-term pleasure. And the long term just doesn't have the same weight or gravity to it because it's so far off. So this is why the short-term pleasure is often too seductive for us. And we just got to keep that in mind. So reward yourself. Know your zombie brain. Okay? Because this is part of how our brain is structured to measure things in a hedonistic way, reward yourself. So if you sat down for 1 minute and looked at your guitar, give yourself a candy or a chocolate or whatever it is that is going to appease that zombie brain and encourage it to want to do it again. Okay? It's very, very kind of simplistic and almost animalistic, behavioristic, but it's important to do and to know that about our brains. Okay? So the other piece of advice that I would give you is to, if you can't finish a song, pass it on to somebody else. This is what songwriting partners are for. So many of the great songs of all time have been written by more than one person, because a lot of times you hit a dead end, pass it on to somebody else and say, hey, can you finish this? Think about the Beatles when they started, Paul would write the verse, the A section, and he would ask John to write the middle 8, and vice versa, okay? And then another thing you can do is just, if you can't figure out how to finish something, put it away for 6 weeks, 2 months, Set a reminder for yourself on your iPhone, and then come back to it and finish it later. Okay? So I hope some of these pieces of advice help you to actually finish a song, because finishing a song is such a great, rewarding experience, and it makes you feel so good. And it's such a blissful experience to listen back to something that you've created, a full-fledged song. Okay? So if you find these videos useful or interesting, and you want to continue on the spiritual path of songwriting, please click that subscribe button. And if you like this video, hit like. Until next time, best of luck with your songwriting.